Hello and welcome to Road Noise, Life 1 Mile at a Time. I'm your host, Michael Blackston. This is episode number 23, and I'm going to talk about a return to focus. I'm going to tell you what I'm doing to try to keep focused on one specific project that I want to get done. I'm desperate to get done. I have big plans for it, and I'm going to tell you what I'm doing to keep in focus and the steps I'm taking. I'm also going to tell you about the week I've had in Conway, South Carolina, etching a large ledger. I'll explain what that means and talk a little bit about that, among some other things going on in my life. And then I'm going to do a review. I'm doing a positive review now at the end of every episode, and I'm going to review a new podcast. Well, it's not a new podcast, but it's new to me, and I'm going to tell you all about that. It's coming up in episode number 23 of Road Noise, Life 1 Mile at a Time. Well, we've gotten up to episode 23 now, and I'm really looking forward to doing this episode. I've been looking forward to doing this episode all day. I'm on my commute home from Conway, South Carolina. I'm doing this episode. I'm recording it on the way back from the same trip where I recorded episode number 22 on the way up. And I don't know, I have a rejuvenation about this podcast. I'm not really sure what the difference is, but I just feel so good about it. I'll tell you one thing that I did was I listened back to episode number 20, I think it was. I think it was 21 where I gave the ultimatum, so it was the one before that, episode 20. I felt like I needed to listen back to that for some reason, and when I did, I realized just how night and day episodes 20 and 21 were. 21 was the ultimatum episode where I said, if you don't get in contact with me, if I don't hear from somebody about this podcast, whether you like it or not, I'm going to quit doing it. And I was kind of pouty. You may not feel that way, but I, listening to it, feel like I was a little pouty. And episode 20, though, was the opposite of that. I spent a lot of time in episode 20 telling you how much I love doing the show and how much I loved you guys that are listening and how much, no matter what, this show was going to keep going. And then in the very next episode, I was giving you an ultimatum. And it really, when I look back on it, it's kind of embarrassing because I don't know. I just was having a bad day and a bad week, bad several days, and I'm glad that I came back, and I'm glad that, well, I never really went away, but I'm glad I didn't go away at all, and I just continued with the podcast, because I'm having fun with it, and to be honest with you, I just released episode 22, as this is being recorded, I released episode 22 yesterday, and the downloads that I've gotten from it for just a day, less than 24 hours, has been almost 3 times the amount I normally get on the first day, which blows my mind because I just don't know where everybody came from, but I'm happy that you're listening. I hope to see the same amount of downloads on this one, and I'm not sure when I'm going to release this one. I considered going ahead and releasing it tomorrow and basically releasing 2 this week just to kind of catch up, because I had gotten behind anyway, and I don't really, although I'm keeping episode 21, the ultimatum episode, I'm keeping it up there. I thought about deleting it, and I'm not now because I want to be authentic. This is life 1 mile at a time. Road Noise, life 1 mile at a time. And so if I hide some of the bumpy parts of the road, that's not really being honest to you, and so I'm not going to delete episode 21. But I don't know, I kind of felt like a reboot, and the problem when you find something new is that you get so excited about it, you just want to rush out and do everything all at once, and everything starts going crazy. And that's kind of the topic of today's episode, aside from my week and stuff that I'll talk about in just a little bit. I want to go ahead and get to the topic. I've decided that on the podcast, I'm going to get right to the main topic first. For those who are listening for that reason, who might have come across it and said, that's what I want to hear about, I'm going to go ahead and get to that. And then if you like what you hear, you can continue to listen to me ramble about my day and the positive review that I do towards the end of the show. So let's get right into the actual topic, which was a return to focus. And the reason that I'm going to a return to focus is because not too long ago I did an entire episode talking about how to finish what you started, and that was all about focus. The whole idea of focusing on one project at a time in order to finish it is a passion for me. It just keeps coming back up. Every time I think I've moved past it as a topic for something, somebody else comes to me and I get into a conversation where I'm giving them some advice on how to finish what they've started or focus on something and not go crazy with all the random stuff around them that just kind of flies around your head. It keeps coming back. And so I realized the other day that I might need to talk about it a little bit more, because I made some changes in a couple of things that I'm doing in order to return to focus. Because I need to listen to myself. I need to not just preach to you about being having priorities, prioritizing where your focus is. I need to practice that as well. If I'm going to preach it, I need to practice it. And I'm finding that here lately, again, my life is starting to fray at the ends. It's like a rope with frayed ends, and I've got to get something and tie them together so that they don't go all over the place. I've got to get control of that rope. So I've decided to do a few things that I normally don't do in order to make sure that I maintain a focus. For one thing, the project I'm working on right now is the novelization of a play I wrote a few years ago called Mr. Long Said Nothing. I've seen one production. I was able to direct a full 6-show run of that show at my local theater, and it's an honor I will never forget. I've talked about that a little more in depth in previous episodes, but I've got this idea now that I want to novelize it. A couple of people told me that it's a great show. We like the show, but it would make a great book. I would really like to get a little deeper into these characters, more so than you can in a play script. And because I do like to write fiction, I've decided I'm going to novelize Mr. Long Said Nothing. I mean, what better outline can you have than a show, a play script that is already ready for the stage and, in fact, has already been performed to audiences, by the way, with really good reviews. All I've got to do is write the book around it, which I'm finding to be harder than I thought it was going to be. I thought it would be an easy process, but actually it's not. When I write fiction, or when I write on my blog, I open the creative portion of my mind and I let my fingers fly. But with this, I can't do that. I have to go line of dialogue by line of dialogue and flesh it out. I can't just go. I can't just let it ride and go as fast as my fingers will work. I have to stop and read every line of dialogue and then envision it and go ahead and try to paint a picture for the reader that I'm seeing in my mind based on this play script. And it's an extra, what seems like it would be a step already taken, it's actually a further step back. I have to do a little more to make this happen and to make it flow and feel right. And because of that, I need extra concentration. So one of the things that I've decided to do is give myself a word count for every day that I can possibly write. I'm going to try to write every day. I know I'm not going to be able to because my life is very, very busy. And hopefully as the play that I'm coming into the weekend to do the final weekend run of the performances of the show of the Addams Family, the musical, when that's over, I'll have a little more time. But I've never given myself a word count that I needed to hit every day. And like I said, I'm going to try to hit it every day, but I'm not sure if I'm really going to be able to because I'm so busy. But on the days that I do write, I'm going to try to hit 2,000 words a day. Now, there will be days I will go over, and that's kind of what I'm banking on, is when I get going, I can get more than 2,000 words. But there are going to be days where I don't get to write. So what I'm hoping to do is write more on the days that I really can get going with a minimum of 2,000 words when I'm writing. And if I do that, the average book, from my researching it on Google and different things, is really up to the writer, but the average book for the type of book that Mr. Long Said Nothing is 60 to 80,000 words. So if I do an 80,000 word book at 2,000 words a day, I should be able to be done in 40 days. And that math seems really easy, but then life gets in the way. But it's one thing that I'm doing in order to keep my focus, because what happens is I've got so much going on that I'm not sure exactly what I need to do, and I'll start trying to write, and I can't get into it. I'm just having to discipline myself a little bit, and so that's one of the steps I'm taking. Another step I'm going to take is I'm going to back off of the blog by one a week. Right now I have been releasing 2 blog posts a week. And those are, on average, 1,200 words per blog post. Well, it's hard to get, on top of everything else that I'm doing, 2 of those out. Because not only do I have to write the blog, I have to craft it so that it's interesting, and because it's a comedy blog, I need it to be funny. But also, I have to edit it. I have to make sure the grammar, I'm very meticulous about my grammar. I have my wife read it again and go over it and find any grammatical errors that I might have missed skimming it. I also have to then do the cover art for it. I'm intending to put some more pictures in, not as one of those picture list kind of blogs, but just every now and then pop in a picture that might relate to what I'm talking about. There's a lot that goes into writing and promoting a blog, and while I'm not getting bored with it at all, I love it. But right now, Mr. Long Said Nothing is going to be a daunting task for me, and I am dedicated and set that I am going to finish it by the end of the year. Now, the numbers I just gave you are that I should be able to finish it in 40 days. But those 40 days could come stretched over the space of a year. I mean, it really could. I hope it doesn't. I hope that 6 months from now, I've got at least the first draft done and am working on the editing. It'll go a lot easier once I've got the first draft done, because then I can just go into the novel and start doing any editing and fixing it and rounding it off, sculpting it, and making it just right. And it's already written. Most people who write know that you don't just spit out a first draft and go with it. That's the easy part. But I actually think this particular book, it will be a little easier once I get to that stage. At least that's what I'm hoping. We're going to see. So I'm backing off of the blog by 1 a week. I'm going to, instead of doing 2 a week, I'm going to release 1 a week. And I think that's fine. Right now, I've got readership and stuff like that, but I don't have a huge following, and I don't think it's going to be anybody is going to email me and say, hey, you used to do 2 a week, where'd one of them go? I'm going to release, probably on Thursdays, 1 blog post a week. And then when Mr. Long Said Nothing is complete, we'll see then where we stand and whether or not I want to up the ante, how many readers I've got on the blog, and we'll kind of step back and take an assessment then and figure out what we want to do. But those are a couple of the steps that I'm doing to return to focus. Because when your life is frayed at the ends like a rope, and you've got little dangling fibers all over the place, have you ever tried to work with a frayed rope? It's much better when it's nice and tight and controllable. You're able to control things. A frayed rope is not going to hold anything nearly as well as a nice, tightly wound rope. And so that's kind of one of the visuals that I'm trying to do. I want to get a control of it, because I've got a musical I'm trying to organize the orchestration on. Well, I can't do that right now, not with Mr. Long going on. I have to put it to the side. I have to put it in my idea pool that you may have heard me speak about earlier in an earlier episode. Or in this analogy that we're using today, one of the phrase at the end of my rope. I'm not at the end of my rope. Maybe that's not such a good analogy. I'm not sure. But anyway, that's the one we're going to go with. It's one project that I've got to do. There are other projects that I want to do, but right now I'm going to focus on getting Mr. Long written. And that's my priority. That's really where I feel right now I need to be. And I'm okay with that. I had to stop and ask myself, what do I want to be doing? Because it seemed like my rope had become so frayed that it made no logical sense when you looked at it. Everything was tangled together. I couldn't grasp my life for all the different things getting in the way. I really, at one point, I guess you could say after listening to the Ultimatum episode that maybe I was at the end of my rope. And maybe that's why I'm so excited and feeling a little bit better about this podcast, or feeling a lot better about this podcast and positive about it going forward, because I feel like I wrangled everything in and got control. So I really want anyone who's listening to this, and you have that problem. Artists are the worst about it. I can say that I'm an artist. About the shiny new object syndrome or weapons of mass distraction, however you want to say it. Project after project, we start because we get excited about it. And then once we have gotten to the middle portion of it, it becomes more of an obligation. You become obligated to it. You're not as excited about it. You realize how much work finishing a project is, and then something new comes up on the horizon and you get excited about that. Well, all that does is fray your rope. Don't do it. It's okay to have new ideas. It's great to have new ideas. You should embrace new ideas, but you need to have a place to put them until the one you're working on right now is done. Now, if you decide that you've come to the end of the project, that you just can't finish it, it's not, there are times when you really just need to back off of something you're doing because it's just not working out. And that's hard for an artist to do. But maybe that's what we need to do, is step back and say, okay, I need to do one of two things. I either need to just scrap it and start on something new because this isn't going to work, or realize that it is going to work, but only if we finish it. So the new object gets put on a shelf or in the pond. However you want to look at it, you will never be happy as long as there are a million unfinished projects in your life. Finish one and it's done. Finish it. Get it done. Mr. Long said nothing was the ultimate eureka moment for me with that. And while I still do have these times where the rope in my life gets frayed, I can recognize it better now, and I can get a handle on it. I can get that rope back together and tight because I've recognized it, and I've also tasted the sweet victory of finishing something. Not only that, but once it was finished, I was able to see my play acted by some of my dearest friends who I cast in a show, and we were able to perform it for an audience. You just can't imagine how awesome that is, and how insightful that is to someone who, before I finished that play, never finished anything. I had a million things in the works. So now I finish stuff. It's the same thing with the other play I wrote. Not Just Like You, Friends Like You. My wife fusses at me because she says, you don't even know the name of your own play. It's Friends Like You, but I keep wanting to say Just Like You. Anyway, it's a comedy, and I dedicated, once I prioritized that was my project. I dedicated to it. And I finished it. It's in a director's hands right now, and I'm hoping that it's actually in the director's hands who's directing The Addams Family, the musical. So I haven't really talked to him about it while the musical's going on, because as someone who's directed before, especially large cast musicals, you just about are at the end of your rope by the time it's done. So I know he likes the play and is interested in directing it, but I'm not even going to mention it to him until maybe 2 or 3 weeks after he's had a chance to breathe from The Addams Family. But I was able to get that far, my script in a director's hands, to possibly see this one done because I prioritized it and I focused on it. So I'm going to... Mr. Long Said Nothing, because so much is going on in my life. At the time that I did Friends Like You and Mr. Long Said Nothing, I didn't have a blog. I didn't have a podcast. Well, I had some podcasts going on, but there's just so much going on right now that I'm having to double down a little bit more, a little more specifically on the strategies that I'm going to have to use to stay focused. But I'm going to do it, and I'm going to finish this novel. And when I'm done, I'll let you know how it goes, and then I'll move on. I'm thinking that the very next thing I'm going to do is finish the musical that I'm writing, the orchestration to it. It's some really basic orchestration. I think what I'm going to do is get like a 5-piece band type orchestration for it so that we can produce it at our local theater with a 5-piece band, and then from there kind of test it, see how it went, see if it needs to be fixed, and if it does, then we can work on it there. And then when I have something I'm happy with, I'll pay an arranger to arrange an actual orchestration for full orchestra for me. So I have plans in the works, but those are on the shelf right now for the musical. Right now it's Mr. Long Said Nothing, and I hope that if you have a project in mind that is really a priority, something you'd really like to see finished, I'm hoping that you'll do what you've got to do to keep control of the rope in your life. Not let it be frayed, not let it be dangling out there, unwinding. Because a frayed rope, all it does, unless you get it under control, is unwind worse and worse and worse. And the more it unwinds, the more it tangles. Life is like that. Get a control over it. Decide what you're going to focus on. Keep that focus, prioritize it, and don't stop. Whatever you do, don't stop until it's done. You'll thank me for it. So how did my week go? I'm on the way back from Conway, South Carolina, and it has been one heck of a week. When I recorded episode 22, it was Monday morning. Now it's Thursday night. It happens to be my 21st anniversary, to be quite honest, and I'm not happy that I had to be away from my wife on this day, but it was a decision that she and I came to together. It's actually her idea that I go ahead and do this, and honestly, I had to. I am so booked with work, traveling all over the Southeast. I couldn't have squeezed this in any other time. I had to finish today. But I made a big, big mistake with this job. And I'm not complaining about it because it is a learning experience, and I'm glad to have learned the experience, although my body, my hand specifically, is in pain. Actually, my hand, my wrist, my shoulder, everything has taken a beating. Just to give you a little background on what I do, I am a hand etcher. To be vague about it, I call myself a professional gravestone artist. What I do is called etching. You have tombstones that are black granite. Just polished black granite. They're beautiful tombstones. Some of the most expensive tombstones you can get. But one of the neat things about the black is that you can do very detailed, very intricate artwork on it. Now, if you're interested in seeing it, you can go to www.blackstonetching.com. That's BlackStonetching. sidetracked.com. That's my website. It's kind of a simple website, but you can see my work. All of the work on there is my work, and you can see what I'm talking about. But you do very detailed artwork on gravestones, portraits, scenes, different images. Normally, I don't do lettering. There is a thing called laser etching, which you stick the stone under a high intense heat laser, and just like a printer, it burns the image on. Now, I don't do that. I do everything by hand, artistic-like. But laser etching is getting bigger and bigger, and eventually I'm going to have to get a laser etcher myself. And there's some things that I just can't compete with a laser etcher for. Before laser etching came along, if anybody wanted lettering etched, you had to do it by hand. But now, 99 times out of 100, if there's to be lettering that the customer insists is etched, it's done by a laser, because I just can't beat it. I can't compete with that. For pricing, for time, for accuracy. And in my line of work, right after Christmas, I'm usually busy right up until Christmas, and then right after Christmas for the first 4 to 6 weeks, I may get work, but it's usually, of the slow times of the year, it's the slowest time of the year for me. And the last time I was in Conway, the owner of the company called me in to quote him a price on doing some work. It was a huge job. This guy was a volunteer firefighter who had passed, and they wanted a firefighter's prayer on a huge ledger. A ledger is a flat marker that lays on the ground, lays just right on the ground, and most of the time it covers the grave area, the area where you would put the coffin in, and normally it would just be grass there. They'll lay a ledger down. Well, they wanted this fireman's prayer, and it was 400 plus letters. And my first thought was they need to laser etch this. But it came along with some hand etching that they wanted done, and they wanted everything to match. And you can tell the difference from laser etching to hand etching. And I was afraid it might be kind of slow, so I said, you know what, I'm gonna give them a rock bottom basement price for this, and I may wish I hadn't, but at least it will guarantee me some work during this time of the year. Well, two things happened. First of all, there hasn't been a slow time. I have been absolutely swamped. I shouldn't say that. I got a little swamped right after Christmas and a little bit in February. I mean, a little slow right after Christmas and right after or through February. But I worked fairly steady. It really wasn't slow. But when it did pick up to its top speed where it is right now, spring's a-coming. Everybody wants their stones done by spring. I am booked solid. I really didn't have that slow time I was talking about, and now I'm trying to squeeze everything in. Well, I underestimated. That's the second thing that happened. I underestimated how long it was going to take me to etch the lettering on the stone. And the amount of time it took me to etch it compared to what I charged them, I should have charged them 4 times what I charged them. I won't give you the numbers, and you probably would think, shoot, that's a great amount of money to make in 4 days. And that would normally sound okay, except for the fact of what it did to my hand. It's been a long time since my hand has hurt and my arm has hurt as bad as it does. I got up, I etched from 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock, 4 straight days. Only one day did I take a lunch, and I only took that because the boss of the company bought lunch for everybody that was there, and so I had to kind of go in there and eat with them. And I appreciated that, and I appreciated the break, but at the same time, I was pushing the envelope. I didn't know if I was going to be able to make it. And it just killed me, and that's what I've been consumed with. I stayed beachside in Myrtle Beach, which is about 10 minutes up the road. When there's no traffic, it's about 10 minutes up the road. And so in the wintertime, I stay beachside because you can get a great room, although I won't stay where I stayed again because the service staff left a lot to be desired, and they charged me some fees and stuff that were absolutely ridiculous. I guess they were just trying to make up as much as they can during the off season, but I'll never stay there again. But that's neither here nor there. I'm not going to get all negative about that. It just has been one of those weeks. It's been get up, etch, go to sleep, get up, etch, go to sleep. So although I was in Myrtle Beach for 3 nights, there was no going to Broadway at the beach. There was no walking on the beach. I did decide I was going to walk on the beach day before yesterday, and I got out there, rolled up my jeans, and got so they wouldn't get soaked, and walked in the foam. And I probably got 100 yards before I had to turn around. I didn't realize how cold it was going to be. And normally I could push through it because I was wanting to get some exercise. But I couldn't do that because I was afraid that too much wind and cold air on my throat would bother me and make me sick before the next show that we've got to do, which is tomorrow night. I did not want to go into the second weekend of the Addams Family with a sore throat because the first weekend I went, it was fine, but Friday night was tough. I had to go to the doctor and get a cortisone shot to strengthen my voice, and I just didn't want to have to go through that again. My voice is nice, and it's feeling strong and feeling good, and I would like to have the second weekend with a strong voice. So I turned around about 100 yards off and came back in, and that was about it for my beaching in Myrtle Beach. It was just, it was a learning experience. I normally charge $50 a foot for etching lettering. I rarely ever have to etch lettering, but I charge $50 a foot. I will never give the discount I gave to this one again. And I can't blame the monument dealer. They asked and I offered, and it was my stupid fault. But it was a learning experience. So I'm going to chalk it up as to a positive thing, something I learned, and we're just going to go from there. And the last thing I want to talk about in this episode, because I've already gone over 30 minutes, I want to tell you about a new podcast that I've listened to. It's not new. There are 54 episodes already for it, and I'm kind of squirrely about even mentioning this podcast to you now, because when I guess I want to go ahead and give you this kind of a warning if you do go listen to it before I give you the positive review, because I really do think that a certain type of person that I'll mention in just a second really ought to listen to this podcast, because I have found it very valuable. But the problem is, I went to make sure that I had all the information right. I subscribed to it, and I looked at my podcast player, Player FM, to make sure that I had the podcast host's name right and everything on there before I started recording this, and I noticed that the last episode was recorded 3.5 months ago. It's been 17 weeks since her last recording. And then I went and Googled and went to her podcast page online to make sure. I thought, let me see if maybe she's said something about I've stopped doing the podcast or whatever, but I don't know. It was a weekly podcast. She used to do one every week. Then at 54, she stopped. And there was nothing that said this would be my last podcast. So I really don't know. After 17 weeks, I kind of think she's probably stopped it, but I'm not going to tell you not to go there. I just want to warn you that after the 54th episode, at this point of this recording, that might be it. So just be aware of that. And which is it's ironic that I would talk about that because I spoke in the Ultimatum episode, in episode 21, that I had considered just dropping this podcast and not saying anything to anybody, just stopping. And when I realized that Andrea had stopped recording her podcast and didn't say goodbye, it just stopped, it kind of made me feel lost and disappointed and almost, well, why would she do that to me? So that was a lesson learned too. I learned a valuable lesson with that just a few minutes ago, that I've just been listening to that podcast for a very short amount of time, and I've already become invested not only in the content, but in the host. I'm going to miss her if this is it. So, without further ado, let me tell you what it is. The podcast is called Launch, Grow, Joy with Andrea Ayers. And it's an entrepreneurial... let me get my mouth around that again. An entrepreneurial podcast. How to sell online and do different things. But it's not necessarily... well, it's not even how to sell online. It's just an entrepreneurial podcast for people like moms and dads to make money with inventions of products that they have. It's for entrepreneurs and people who have a product and wanting to figure out how to get that product to market, how to market it online, into catalogs, through retail stores, all kinds of stuff. And I love that type of content because I'm trying to grow, I'm trying to learn, I'm trying to bone up and be ready to answer questions when I start the Artist Brainstorm podcast that I'm going to do to try to help artists who want to make money with their art. And so I'm just kind of educating myself, and I found this podcast, and like I said, she has 54 episodes, and even though she stopped at this point, I don't know if she'll pick it back up again. I highly suggest you go ahead and subscribe to it if you're that type of person. If you have an idea in mind and you're not really sure where to go, these episodes are very interesting, and they have a lot of great information on them. She talks to a lot of people who are influential and have done it from bootstrapping, and you really get to... I'm not sure really how to explain this. I've listened to a lot of podcasts and a lot of entrepreneurial podcasts that tell you can do it, but they don't really tell you how. There's a lot of good how-to information in Launch, Grow, Joy with Andrea Ayers. And so I encourage you to look that up in iTunes or whatever your podcast player is and see if maybe it's something you'd be interested in. And just be warned that 17 weeks ago she stopped at the 54th episode. Now, if you're listening to this on down the road years from now, I don't know, she may have picked it back up again. I'm not sure. I am going to email her and see if I can contact her and find out if it's over, and if it is, I may mention that to you, but it makes no matter. There are 54 episodes of good content in that podcast that I would suggest you go and hit if that's the type of thing that you're into. So that's it for episode number 23 of Road Noise Life 1 Mile at a Time. Again, my name is Michael Blackston. If you would like to contact me, you can do so at feedback@michaelblackston.com. That's feedback at michaelblackston.com. You can also go to michaelblackston.com and check out my blog. And as far as the Road Noise Podcast website, by the way, it's still up, but I'm not adding the new shows to it right now because I'm planning on changing. I'm really not sure whether I'm going to host it on WordPress or just use the Libsyn page that I've got and use that as my website page. Anyway, right now, if you would like to subscribe, please go subscribe to the podcast, Road Noise Podcast Life 1 Mile at a Time. Give me a review in iTunes. I'd love to do that because the more reviews and stuff and ratings that I get in iTunes, the more it reaches other people and it will help me grow. So, until next road trip, thank you for sitting alongside me in the passenger seat as we learn to live life 1 mile at a time.